We're meeting tonight for Sites and Facilities Committee meeting, and I know we've got a lot of information. So thank you everybody for joining us, and thank you Kevin for attending the meeting. And Mike, if you want to go ahead and take it away, that'd be great.
Absolutely. All right, I'm going to share the agenda, and then once I put everything in a PowerPoint tonight just for the sake of because there's a lot of different documents and stuff, and I didn't want to have to keep bouncing back and forth. So once we leave the agenda, I'll jump into the PowerPoint, and then it's all broken up according to the 5 steps. So 5 big items tonight, kind of 5 and a half. Kevin's going to talk very quickly about tomorrow at the high school. Then we'll talk a little bit about the DCA tour. A bunch of board members were able to come out for that and see the construction updates. We'll talk then about the HVAC grant. We have some new enrollment projections for I'm sorry, that should be 24-25. And capital budget proposed list for 24-25. And then we'll talk some about the proposed operations department's budgets for 24-25. It'll just give us a nice snapshot of everything that we're looking at moving forward in the year, where we're expecting some of our big expenditures, and just some things we're thinking through for managing that. So, Kevin, do you want to jump in on high school?
Sure. Thanks, Mike. And good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
I'm having a hard time with access on my laptop, so I'm joining by phone. So that's why I might look a little different this evening. We've been working for the last 4 or 5 hours with the high school, with the city of Danbury. We've had a long-standing pipe repair issue, and I'm not sure how long Mike can provide the details at the high school related to our boiler system. And so given our anticipated drop in temperatures tomorrow, we are looking to start the high school tomorrow on a 3-hour delay. This will allow the city of Danbury and contractors to get in the building in the morning, hopefully get the heating system repaired, and hopefully the building will be warmed up in time by the kids' arrival. If it's not warmed up in time, certainly we're hoping it will be warmed up before the kids leave. It is our understanding that the G building is not impacted because they were on a HVAC system. Also, the auditorium could be an outlet for classrooms that are too cold to have classes in, so we can move them to the auditorium. And then the black box itself and the 2 adjoining classrooms will also have heat because they're also part of a separate HVAC system with forced air. And so, ideally, we would prefer to have heat, of course, heating sources in all of our classrooms and throughout the school. Rich Jalbert facilities team is trying to literally find as many alternative heating solutions that we can put in some of our more uncomfortable condition classrooms by tomorrow morning. And so he's literally going around the district now trying to find heating fans or heaters to put in classrooms. He thinks he might have at least 25 to 30 that we can put throughout different classrooms in the morning. But again, we're expecting a significant drop in temperatures tonight. And so we do anticipate that building is going to open up pretty cold tomorrow, particularly with no heat coming in. Our hope is with the sun coming up, at least on the east or western side of the building. I forget which side the football field is on now. At least that part of the building will be a little bit warmer as it was this afternoon when we were touring the school and trying to understand which parts of the school is going to be a little bit more comfortable than other parts. And like I said, the G building is approximately a quarter of the building will be heated, but the other parts will not. And so we were going back and forth in whether or not do we cancel school totally tomorrow, or do we open up on a delay? The reality is, and for the board members who remember last year how challenging it was outside for high school graduation, it's even more uncomfortable in the school in June. So one way or the other, we're going to have to get this day back. And we are betting that the work that they're going to start very early tomorrow morning is going to give us some comfort later toward the afternoon, by noon, 1 o'clock to tomorrow afternoon. And hopefully we can get the half day in at the very least. So soon your emails will be populated with an update saying that we're about to send an email out to our families and admin council, making them aware of this shift for tomorrow. And the 3 hour delay will mean that will give us the time to drop off our kids for all of the other morning routes. So the middle school is second tier, elementary is third tier, and then that will give us time to then circle back to get the high school. So they will be um, on the 3 hour delay schedule. So that will not impact the other two tiers. And then everyone will have a regular dismissal at the end of the day. So I wanted to provide that update. Obviously not something we're happy about, but that is kind of the cards that we've been dealt. And the city did work with us. I guess initially there was plans to do that work this Saturday. They were able to move it up to tomorrow, but they could not get anyone there tonight. So the 3 hour delay, it looks like the best possible solution that we can find, short of closing tomorrow.
Thank you for the update. Appreciate it. And obviously,
Yeah.
there's a lot of people involved in coordination. So I know it's it's hard to get somebody like this. It's kind of a trade at the last minute with these kinds of issues. So thank you.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Michelle.
All right, thank you, Kevin. All right, I'm gonna reshare my screen here. And does everybody see a blue screen that says DCA tour?
Yes.
All right. So this is item number one. As many of you know, we had a little tour of the site. So what I tried to do here is mix together the renderings and then the actual pictures, hoping there would be some sort of parody. Some of it worked, some of it didn't. But anyway, we got some good artwork here. So there's the rendering of what the building's going to look like. Everyone has seen that. And then this is that exterior section. So if you're looking there, that's pretty much where that picture is right there. You can see the gym area is going to be just to the left. And that's where we came out. It was very dusty. Everyone was coughing and breathing into their sleeves. So I was a little relieved when we got back out into that parking lot there. There's the gym section, which is, again, it's going to be right there just to the left of that cement mixer. And so this is the second or third floor, I think. Again, it's hard to tell what you're looking at here, but these are all going to be the classroom spaces. Yeah, it's just a big open shell, but that's good news because that means they're well past the demolition phase and moving into phase 2. So it's now a shell and moving well into the construction phase. That's the old cafeteria, if you remember it, where we actually left that piece in place because it's actually a really good food service section. We're building around that, adding to it. There's Dean Esposito, or Mayor Esposito with Antonio, a couple board members there in the background. And that is just inside. You can actually see that little patio off to the left there where some of that outdoor furniture was. And this is that entryway. If you remember the original entrance when you walked in through the turnstiles, those turnstiles would have been just to the right. That's going to be where the I think that's the emergency services section of the Career Academy. And that's what it looks like now, completely gutted. And there's everybody right at that entrance there. So the turnstiles on the picture on the left would have been right behind you. Antonio is right there on the front on the right-hand picture. So just to his back would have been those turnstiles in that original boardroom when you walked in. And there's going to be our library media center. And there's our wonderful board. Good looking board, I think, aren't we? We have a good looking board. All right. So there we all are. So thank you everybody who attended. It was just I just think it's great to see these things in action, especially when you've been looking at pictures for so long and, renderings and trying to imagine how does it go from, from this sort of corporate, structure into a school. And well, we get to see it in real action. So it's fun. And I'm glad everybody got to come out and take a look. So, all right. Any questions about that before we move on to HVAC?
Does anybody have any questions? Comments? I just want to say I was on the site walk and it was very exciting to see it actually happening live and in person. So that was really great. You were able to get the whole board and other elected officials out there. I think add a lot of wind to what we're doing here. I think so. Just want to say thank you.
Thank you. And I kept asking Antonio and Dan and everybody. I said, "It's on schedule, right? It's on schedule." So the takeaway it was yes, it is. So all right, HVAC rebate grant. So again, if you remember, we've talked about this HVAC grant. This came out last year. The way it's set up, it's a little, I don't want to say it's misleading because it is a grant, but it's really set up as a rebate. And you have to have a project completely set to go with the money set aside, literally sitting in an account or in a capital budget somewhere before you can even apply to that grant. So as we've gone back and worked side by side with Antonio and Dan and other folks from Department of Public Works, we didn't really have a project that was teed up and ready to go that would win the award. Because we didn't have these millions of dollars set aside for these projects. The projects that we did have that would have qualified for HVAC were already bond projects that we're getting reimbursement from, so they wouldn't have qualified because they're already getting a state reimbursement. So Rich, myself, and Antonio and Dan, we sat around, just kind of thought of different ways we could still make some good on this grant. And we sat in on a webinar Rich and I did a couple of weeks ago, and based on the way that they've set up the guidelines, we have an idea where we can come up and probably get about $25,000 back on this. And so this round 2 submission, which is due December 31st, what we're going to be doing is going back and filing for rebates on a lot of previously paid for HVAC stuff that we had. A lot of it, things like air purifiers, stuff that we bought during the pandemic. You're allowed to go back into March of 2020. So we went back and found a bunch of things that we spent money on, and we're still coming across some of these billings. So right now, the total sum is just about $42,000, and we'll get a 63% reimbursement on that. So it's something, and certainly for the position that we find ourselves in, always sort of looking for an extra dollar to repair some plumbing or do some electrical work. $25,000 will go a long way for us. So we'll certainly, take that if we can get it. Now, the headline here is there's still 2 more rounds of the HVAC grant. So in a couple slides here, I'm going to talk about our capital project list that we'll be submitting up to the city this coming November 30th. And in that capital project list, we've identified specific HVAC projects so that if and when they get funded, we'll then be able to take that and say, okay, here's the money. It's now sitting in the capital budget, account. So Rich and I will be able to go in and put in the application, and we'll get the award for rounds 3 and 4, just depending on how the timing works out. So while this December's grant isn't going to be anything that significant, we're very optimistic about rounds 3 and 4. Which will be next year, and I believe the year after. I think they're year after year, which is actually good because once you get awarded the grant, you only have something like 12 months to spend it to actually do the project and complete it. So depending on when that money is released and all that, we'll just have to make sure we time it so that we qualify for those grants. So yeah, that's the HVAC grant, and we'll have that first one in December 31st.
Are there any committee members that have any questions? Comments? Okay, I guess we're all good, Mike.
Okay. So next up is our enrollment projections. Most of you probably have seen this. I think we shared a very similar looking chart at the beginning of this year. I want everyone to just see the trajectory. Grade by grade isn't probably as interesting as just the yellow line at the bottom that shows the total roll-up numbers. And the way we do these projections, there's really 2 things we look at. So for example, if you look at the 2 gray columns on the right, 23-24 YTD and 24-25, you'll notice that the grade 1 number from this year, which is 900, is the same as the grade 2 number for next year. So a lot of times we're literally just rolling those kids up into the next grade level. But for some of these, we do make some tweaks and adjustments based on new information that we have. If we're expecting an influx of a certain grade, if there's some legislative or policy change, the pre-K and K numbers are heavily dependent on our demographers' projections, which look at things like birth rates, in and out migration, building permits. It factors in all those things to make a guess about how many kids are actually going to be showing up in kindergarten. And for the most part, they're pretty much on with their number. So we kind of take those projections, and then we take some of the internal numbers that we have, and we come up with our projection. So our 23-24 YTD, this was actually our October 1 number. So this is the number that went to the state. It was 12,114. Now, we know that feels a little bit low, and honestly it is, because we see kids showing up all through the year. So by January, that number is probably going to tick over 12,200. By March or April, it'll probably be back right around 12,300. So this 12,300 number we have here is a realistic projection about what we're going to need to prepare for and frankly budget for next year. If you remember, during the budget book, we provided there was a 3D bar chart, and at the top of each one there was a little red box that said adjusted. Some of that adjustment was the difference between what we see in October versus what we see in January, February, because the kids are here and we need to have a desk for them. They need to have a teacher. They need to have their lunch and a bus service. So it ends up costing whether or not it's in that October number. So we have to budget for it. So we feel pretty comfortable that 12,304 is an accurate number for budgeting purposes as we enter this budget cycle. Okay. Oh, sorry.
I just want to make sure. Anybody have any questions? I have one, Mike. So
Yeah.
Are you saying that it's customary that after January, let's say 30th, we see 100 students at least minimum enter?
Between January and May? Yeah,
Right?
that's realistic. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay, so capital budget, I just mentioned this a little bit before. So just to set this up, I'm sure all of our board members know about how this works, but for anybody else listening, so our capital budget is, there's really two ways that we think about how we manage our buildings. Rich has a maintenance budget, right? And depending on the year and what we think we're going to need to do, he could have anywhere from, $600,000, $700,000, $800,000 in there. And that focuses on things that, by virtue of the facility sharing agreement, fall in our bailiwick. So this could be desks, this could be door locks, door repairs, broken windows, whiteboards, installations of smart boards, projectors, things like this. Rich, I know I'm missing a whole bunch of stuff. Flooring, right? We do flooring. I don't know. Rattle off anything I'm missing here. We'll do minor plumbing repairs, all that kind of stuff. So that comes in out of our budget, but capital is bigger projects, right? And these are generally things that will fall to City Department of Public Works. So these will be things like HVAC systems, plumbing, major plumbing repairs, stadium lights, new fields, new playgrounds, playscapes, exterior doors, things like that. So, my general rule is if it's a major system, right, an electrical system, a plumbing system, that's generally going to be the city. If it's something smaller and internal, it's generally going to be us. There's always some caveats in there, but that's just a sort of good way to think about it. Capital budget is really some of those big things, right, that we need to do. It's adding an addition to a school, things like this. So what we're doing now as we partner with the city is we're giving them a list of what we think are priority projects, and then we'll work together on determining which of these sort of get put to the top of the list. The city's always going to have its own priorities. So perfect example today is the steam pipes at Danbury High School. That's an HVAC concern. It's an HVAC. It's a heating concern. It's a boiler concern. It's not the sort of thing that Rich and I really think about on a daily basis, because it's really like a deep system thing that ties into city water and plumbing and all that kind of stuff. So it's really not on our radar. So sometimes they say, no, this is a priority project. We're going to fix these steam pipes, and then that becomes a priority project because it's just not on our radar. But our priority list here is really things that are on our radar, things that we've recognized that we need. So we went through and broke this down into 3 different sections. And we thought about it in terms of just general buildings and repairs, security, and then technology. And it's not uncommon for things like technology to get put into this budget when you look at it across all the different city departments. So I'll run through this quickly. There's a lot on here. But basically, our 1-year total for next year is about $7.68 million. And from the buildings, this includes, and Rich, you can jump in here because you'll have a lot more description and detail on these. But KSP, so King Street Primary, this was a big one. If you've been there recently, this was a school that was probably built in the 70s when that open school, I don't even know what it was called. It was like a theory of education that without walls, kids would have to learn with distractions and they'd be more, I don't know. It didn't last very long. It was a trend. It was a fad. But for the schools that were built during that time, they are still struggling with trying to manage through this. So KSP is one of those schools, and there are really not walls. There's some partitions and things like that, but it's not a great learning space for kids that just need to focus and not have distractions. So we really want to put some walls at that school, and it'll support the teachers, it'll support the learning and the kids. So that's just a big project that we want to do.
Right.
Rogers Park, that elevator has been challenging now for several years, so we want to just get it replaced and not have to just hope that the repair folks come in on time and replace whatever the pieces are, and that it doesn't go down. It's a 3-story building. They have students in that building that are on crutches. I think they have they might even have I don't know if they have a wheelchair. I know they have crutches and things that kids just need to access that elevator. So we want to get it replaced. And then you'll see here, this is what I was referencing in the HVAC grant. We have 4 different air conditioning lines and 1 air balancing line, priced accordingly. West Side is a bit of a different one because they actually have all their ductwork in place. They would just need the unit put on the roofing and hooked up. South Street, Morris would need full systems in order to work. Ace, because it's such a small building, they also have ductwork. We think we could do this one for a little bit less money as well. DHS, our stadium lighting there, is going to need an overhaul pretty soon. We're constantly replacing bulbs and wiring, and Rich can talk more about this, but we think it's just time that all those lights get replaced. Ellsworth Avenue, there's been a section of roof there that's been leaking for a while. We think it's connected to a problem with the way the solar panels were installed, but regardless, we think that roof is going to need to be replaced. Rogers Park is going to need new lights in their auditorium. It's not a lot of money, but it's a tricky installation because they're over the seats and it's very high. So you need a scissor lift and some scaffolding. It's actually a very complicated process of replacing those lights. So we're putting that in here as well. At KSI, if you've been there during or after a rainstorm, you've noticed that there's some very unfortunately placed puddles in play areas. There is drainage there, but for some reason the gravity doesn't take over the way it needs to. So we want to reset some of those drains so that the kids don't have little potholes and puddles in their way when they're playing. MRP, Mill Ridge Primary. We've talked for a couple years now about trying to get this done, but those pods, the 3 round pods have overhangs, and on those overhangs there are I-beams, and on those I-beams sit all kinds of birds, and we had some bats that were living up in there that we had to clear out. So it's a constant headache, and we just want to enclose those areas with soffits, so we don't have to worry about pigeons and all the things that fall as a result of that. And that's a play area for kids too. They'll hold PE out there too when it's raining. So, and you go there and you see there's chalk on the ground, and then there's bird droppings. It's just something that needs to be taken care of. MRP also needs a new playground. We've made multiple repairs on that one, but it's there's just some damage on some of the plastic areas of the playscape, and they need a new one. Sidewalk bus park paving at DHS. This is one we put into 25-26. It's a need, but we just think it's better suited in 25-26. South Street School needs an office conversion in one of the modular spaces. Haystown needs a bathroom renovation. District-wide, we want to do fence replacements at, we're saying 18 schools. There's some that obviously need it more than others, but we're putting them all in there. Rogers Park, door replacement for the front exterior doors. Pembroke, we want to change up some of the window and blind replacements there as well. Any questions about buildings before I jump into security?
Mike, I just wanted to raise or underscore a point about some of the schools up here, if that's okay, Michelle.
Please do.
One, I just wanted to mention something about KSP. Rich, given his historical responsibilities in his department for maintenance and security, and Mike is also well aware, as security reports to his office now. We also have some considerable security challenges at KSP with all of these open classrooms. I believe it was last year we were able to install doors in our library media space. And so in the event we have any type of lockdown at the school, we can get a number of different classes in that space now with closed doors. But that is not the case for everybody in the building. I just recently had a walkthrough of the school with the principal. And for the board members who have been in district for a long time or have gone through Danbury Public Schools, to Mike's point earlier, I believe it was, and Rich, you probably know all of the buildings, but I believe Rogers Park, Stadley Ruff, and I'm sure I'm missing a couple of schools that were part of this open school, open classroom model. And for whatever reason, we were able to get the vast majority of them closed, but KSP is still open. And I understand there's some issues and challenges with the flowing of air from classroom to classroom by putting up walls. So it's not just about putting up the walls, but it's also about making sure there's appropriate airflow throughout the school. The air condition upgrade helps us significantly at the schools for summer school. Right now, we are really strained for space at our buildings, particularly with special ed summer school scheduling, and with the new legislation, we have to invite in more schools, more kids for summer school remediation, and so the more schools that we can provide air conditioning, the better for the system. And as Mike pointed out, including it in the capital budget allows us to maximize the opportunities available from the HVAC grant. So, Mike, I appreciate your leadership and thoughts on this.
Thank you.
And Mike, can you clarify the exterior front door at Rogers Park Middle School? Is that the same door that we had an issue with before?
I believe it is. Rich, can you share anything about that?
No, actually, the city did replace the front doors. There was somebody that actually had driven into it. That door is okay, but looking at some of the other exterior doors, the doors and the door frames are getting rotted. So we will need to replace additional doors there at some point.
Okay, thanks, Rich.
Louisa, do you have a question?
I do. Thanks, Michelle. So out of this 24-25 portion of the list, how many items on this list are we looking at that are high priority, and how much of this list is a wish list?
That's a great question. I mean, I would say everything on here is high priority, but Rich, I don't know if you want to.
Well, what I can say is the air balancing for 300,000 That's actually a state mandate. That was the original deadline was this December 31st, and the state extended it to December 31st of 2024. And what's going to happen after we get all that air balancing done? We'll basically have a report of each school of how the HVAC is working, and that will help us determine the most important schools to go after for HVAC upgrades based on the individual scores. The lighting projects, DHS stadium lighting, we've been probably spending 10 to 15,000 a year just replacing light bulbs and ballasts. That 350,000 would get us the LED replacement, which would save us a considerable amount of money. Any lighting projects that we would do would save us energy costs. The KSI parking lot, that's been a problem for a few years, and that number, I'm having problems reading here. I think it's like 250,000. Really, the whole KSI KSP parking lot is due for replacement, and I know from speaking to Tim Nolan, he's been putting it in his capital budget every year, and he hasn't quite gotten the funds for it yet. So hopefully we can support him on that.
Louise, I'll stick by my position, which to me it's all critical. And I use this example with some of my team. Rich has heard me say it a few times. I feel like there's times when we're driving on a flat tire, and yeah, maybe you could get another block out of that flat tire, but at what point does it damage the wheel? And now you've got $1,000 repair as opposed to a $50 repair. I feel like we get into that situation a lot with our repairs where, could we get through another year? Well, yeah, I suppose. But then if we are in a position where we have to do an emergency repair, and we're paying, somebody to come in to work the weekend and over the night, and, something that could have been done for $10,000 suddenly cost us 75. That's the sort of thing I'm really trying to avoid getting into here. And I feel like while some of this may be preventative, a lot of it is really just like the time is now. We have to go on some of these things. Otherwise, the price is just going to start to increase on them.
Right. But Louisa, the good news is the HVAC upgrades are reimbursable up to 63%, I believe.
Yes. And to Kevin's point, if the HVAC figures into the walls at KSP, which it will, that would also qualify.
Can I just have a follow-up question, Michelle?
Oh, yes.
So these total amounts that we're looking at here, these are not going to get put on our school budget? Does this goes on a separate, where does this get paid out of?
Yeah, the capital budget's a separate ledger.
Okay,
Yeah.
so that's coming from the city directly.
Correct.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
And again, thank you, Louisa. And I'll just reiterate, this is going to be our request that will get merged with the Department of Public Works request. So we're telling them what our priorities are from a schooling perspective, and how that ultimate decision will gets made. We're certainly going to lobby as best we can on behalf of the projects that we know need to get done.
Mike, if I could just add one more thing about the Pembroke window and blind replacement too. There's probably about 3 or 4 schools that we have old single pane windows that on a cold, windy day, you could put your hand up to the window and you can feel the draft coming in through the windows. We've been spending a lot of time and effort replacing hardware, to make sure that the windows lock properly. It's become a security issue that, there's some schools, they're putting sticks in the windows because they're worried that it's not going to stick. And there would be a return on investment with energy saving. It's not as quick of a return on investment as lighting is, but there is some savings involved in that.
Thank you, Rich.
Mike? Air balancing, I guess the air balancing that's going to be done initially for the conditioning, analysis. Is KSP going to be a part of that? In other words, we've got the walls. You said that that would be included, the HVAC. Does that number, that 1 million, the system that would be required is a new system, to handle all the new.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
that's
and I don't know exactly what the system is there currently. I know in these spaces you have to have a supply and a return, and I know for a fact that there's not a sufficient supply and return for all the different classrooms that are in there. So whatever that is, we would have to figure out how to section off that part of the budget and and then make that an application for the HVAC grant. Rich, do you know what's currently in there?
I would believe with the walls at King Street, it would require some HVAC modifications to ensure that there's supply and demand in each space. And as part of the follow-up on that, we would want an air balancing company to come in to ensure that the HVAC is working as it was designed.
Do we have a layout or a proposed layout as to what the new floor plan would look like in order to consider what the HVAC system would be? In other words, as part of the analysis, because if that seems to be one of the major like one of the main
Yeah.
priorities here on our listed first, obviously that needs to be considered if we're doing the air balancing and trying to get the grants,
Sure.
right? And this
Sure.
is one of the first, real projects moving forward. Is this like a priority? Because it looks like we would need something like that, a layout or something to
Yeah.
try to figure out.
Definitely. I would say that one of the first steps with that project would be to get an architect to come up with a design of how we would want that laid out, including any HVAC modifications.
We haven't approached that yet, right? Is there any, Mike, do you know if there's any kind of a layout that's being considered or?
Yeah. So I when you go in there, there is a footprint for a classroom, but it's like I said, there's kind of partitions. Sometimes there's a bookcase. It's there's kind of like curtainy things up there. There's a number of different ways that sort of create a footprint for a classroom. My sense is we would start there, right? And say, okay, does this work? And maybe you got to nudge something a few feet either way. Kevin.
Rich, it might be helpful because we did have to actually close in one of the rooms at King Street Primary. I
Special
believe
ed
it was
room.
this summer.
Yeah.
Rich, can you walk the committee through like kind of what that room looked like prior? Because to Mike's point, the footprint for the classroom itself is already there. And each classroom is separated by a wall in between, but the front facing of the room, it's almost like watching a TV show. Like if you're on a set of a live TV show, you're looking straight in and there are no walls, there's no door, there's nothing. And so as once you come out of that room, I mean, you can just hear the noises and classroom chatter, throughout the entire hallway.
Right. No,
Sure. Actually, there was a special ed room that we enclosed last summer. And as you walk down the hallways through King Street Primary, you have a counter with a sink in it. I believe the orientation of the sink would need to be changed if we're enclosing the room because the sink is facing the hallway, not the classroom. So that countertop and sink would have to be changed so you could use it from the classroom and then build a wall enclosing that countertop. So I think there is a nice, easy design to come up with on that.
I know that Lauren and I had walked it last year and it is very awkward. You're absolutely right, Kevin. It kind of feels like you're on a set.
Yeah.
So that's what I was wondering. Like if you close it off, obviously there has to be certain exchanges and, intakes and,
And electrical too. I mean, we said, Mill Ridge was originally open pods, and when they closed them off, they did them kind of on the fast and cheap, and there were only a couple electrical outlets in those whole rooms. Of course, it was the 70s. Nobody was anticipating what was about to come, but they literally couldn't plug in a pencil sharpener or a laptop charger. So another consideration, which is, do we need to add electrical in there? Or is it just a wall that goes up? So a lot of considerations, but thanks for raising that. It's an important important thing to start thinking about.
Yeah, I mean, if we just want to really kind of start addressing it, if we can at least start getting, trying to think of incorporating it with the
Yeah.
ACC, next enrollments, you said 3 and 4 or whatever. I don't know how long it'll take, but thank you.
All right. Okay, so I'll jump into security and technology here quickly. So security, as I've mentioned in the past, a lot of our sort of day-to-day security stuff, which is things like locks, alarms, cameras, a lot of these get funded through our security grant. And because, again, those security grants, just like the HVAC grant, they're rebate grants. We started with a good, healthy amount of money that got those rolling, and now we use those replenishments of that 63% as they come back in to sort of buy the next thing. And it is sort of dwindling down over time, so eventually we're going to have to replenish it. But where we decided to put our capital request for security here was in these 4 things. So if you all remember, Raptor was, we talked a lot about it last year. We are still waiting to put forth our district share of what we believe that's going to cost us. So I'm still in conversations with Raptor every week or two, either by email or phone, just to check in. We want to go on this, especially after, some of the concerns that we've had recently. We really want to push hard on Raptor. We just need to make sure we have our district share of those grant funds, which is about $150,000 for the full cost. The whole thing is going to end up being about $450,000, if I recall. Jump back up to the top here. Cell phone boosters. We have a lot of campuses where you just have a really hard time getting a cell phone signal. I'm sure everybody has experienced this. Sometimes a minor inconvenience, but in an emergency, that's a security issue. So for our security budget, we're putting cell phone boosters. And then also right below that line, we have radio boosters, walkie-talkies, just to make sure the signal's clear, it's not grainy. And that would actually allow us to, especially in certain cases, hear radio at different schools. So if there was something happening in the region, folks with the radio could all tune to the same channel and communicate with one another. So radio boosters would help with that. And then in anticipation of Raptor, we want to get tablets and devices for all of our safety advocates, so they have access to the system and can use it just as fluently as everybody. So we're expecting about $45,000 for those devices. And then moving down to technology, as a one-to-one district, we're constantly in need of doing refreshes. This is an expensive endeavor, but we have estimated that if we do a refresh every on about a 3 to 4 year cycle, we're saying 4,000 Chromebooks here because we're leaving a buffer, but realistically, every 4 years, the entire cycle of Chromebooks should turn over 3,000 a year. That's 12,000 Chromebooks. We leave a buffer in there for breakage and spills and, malfunctioning. So that's about 1.2 million, which we want to just start having built in year after year. And then we have to refresh teacher devices too. So about $175,000 for the teacher devices. Photocopiers and printers. We have some very, very old copiers and printers, and we're looking to do a initial thrust of about $760,000. That would get us about, I think, 30 or 40 copiers. We have about 112 copiers in the district, if I recall correctly. So that would get us about 30-40% of the way there. We're obviously going to have to add more with the academy. So we need to start that replenishment. VoIP, we still have a lot of phones that are on copper lines. They're expensive to pay for the lines, to pay for the service. To get everything over to VoIP, it would solve a lot of our problems. There also aren't enough copper lines. So we would be able to switch over to that, and then over time we would see that money all come back to us. SentinelOne, this is a product that we started using shortly after the data breach over the summer. It is without getting too wonky about it, a technology security product. It constantly scans our network for threats. It's just sort of like a watchdog that just constantly roams your network and looks for nefarious materials. Something like this would have very likely caught the incident that happened. And last but not least, DHS, we need to rebuild the website, as well as the Academy website. There's going to be a new website that has all the Academy information on it. It's going to be easier to navigate. It's going to rebrand the high school. But there's also a tech reason for this, which is kind of boring, but I'll tell you anyway. When we redid our district website, that old district website was on a server platform called Intrado. When it was rebuilt, it went over to the server of the company that built it for us called Lumi. Every one of our schools is a Google site. So that's the second server. They're on Google or Lumi. The old DHS site is the only one still remaining on that old server. So we have to pay an additional fee for that hosting service. So as soon as we can lift it off of there, we can save that money. Now it's not significant. It's about $10,000-$15,000 a year. But you can see over about 9 years, that would come back to be more money than it's worth. So it's appropriate to do this rebuild now when we have to do the rebrand anyway, when we have to change everything to work so that it meets the aesthetics and the information needs of the academies. So this is just the right time to rebuild the Danbury High School website, get it on the right server, make it look right, and be prepared for the future. So all told, our 24-25 ask is about $7,680,000, and that's across buildings, security, and technology. Some of these we've spaced out over 3 years. So our 3-year ask at this time is $12,180,000.
Question, Mike?
Yeah.
Insecurity radio boosters for
Yes.
7 schools. Can you give me you or Rich give me an overview on what type of biodirectional amplifier plan you have for 7 schools for 50K?
Yeah, I'll have Rich get back to you on that. That's outside my expertise, unfortunately. But I would certainly love some of your feedback on that too, Mr. Russo. I know that's an area of your expertise. So
Okay.
I'll connect with you offline.
Can you add anything to that, Rich?
Actually, Rich Torres has been handling that. I think he's been working with Norcom.
Okay.
So he would probably know the most about that.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Mr. It is Rich Torres. Yeah, sorry, there's 2 Riches. We get confused.
Would you feel, if you feel comfortable, could you have Rich send me the 50,000 foot plan?
Yeah, absolutely.
How you're going to accomplish that for 50K?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Sal, any other committee members who can ask any questions? Any non-committee members?
I have a quick question, Michelle, may I ask?
Please, Kate, go ahead. Thank you.
Mike, can you help us understand sort of like the process? You mentioned that this gets submitted to the city as part of a plan. Can you talk about sort of like the steps that take place between what we submit, what we end up getting, and how we prioritize the different projects?
Yeah. Thanks, Kate. And I'll need a little help from Kevin and Rich on this because it is a complex process. So our due date to submit this into the city is November 30th. From there, there's what their actual process is. I know there's several individuals that go through these budgets with a fine-tooth comb and they'll compare, what does Public Works say they want versus what does the schools say they want. Kevin, and again, please help me out if you have any more detail on this. What that process actually involves in terms of priorities. I can't say I've been through it. I know historically, the schools didn't really put their priority projects in. This is a relatively new thing for us. In the past, Public Works would generally just say that, this is what we've identified as the things that are critical. So this is really something new for us. And it was, John Spang and Kevin and myself, and we were just sort of thinking through this last year. We said we need to make sure we have our priorities up there for them too, because they can't know what's happening in the schools. So, Yeah, in terms of what the individual steps are, once it sort of hits that city process, this will really be the first time we're going through it together. Kevin, I don't know if you can add anything more to that.
Mike, I might be able to very briefly.
Oh, sorry, John, I forgot you
Yeah.
were on here. I should have thrown it too.
So the capital budget process runs on a separate track from the operating budget. And it's actually created and managed not by the finance department or by the mayor's department to start with. It's managed by the city planning department. And the process is headed up by the city planner, Sharon Calitro. She'll send out instructions, deadlines, things like that. Once all the projects are collected from the different departments, you know, for example, police, fire, and so on and so forth, they submit their own projects. Then one of the main thing they converted into a 5-year plan. Some things they may say it were a roof, it's almost ready to go. They may say, okay, we'll do that in year 3, or something else is more urgent. Last year we thought we could do it in year 4, but it won't last, so we're moving it up to year 1. And in the mayor's budget, you can see the capital budget and the different 5 years and when they plan to do what. But probably the most important thing they look at is affordability, and how are they going to finance these projects? And it's one of 2 ways. They'll either issue general obligation bonds, could be for a 10-year bond or a 15-year bond, and those might have some of the longer term projects, more of the bricks and mortar kind of things. That's one of the 2 sources. The other source is the operating budget itself, the mayor's budget. There will be some of these projects that will be just funded out of the regular budget, which is from property taxes and paid in the first year. So it's sometimes how much can they afford to do in 1 year, and how much debt do they want to issue? What can wait till another year, and those kind of things. Then the recommendation comes out of the city planning department and goes to the mayor's office in the middle of February, for when all other town departments are due, for included in the overall budget that the city council takes up the first week of May.
Thank you both. Michelle, can I ask one quick follow-up question, please?
That was a great question. No, please go ahead.
So I just want to make sure I understand. John, you're saying that typically the city planning department does this based on a 5-year plan, is that right?
That's correct. And that's very typical of cities and towns around Connecticut, especially.
Okay, so I'm wondering, like, we've got this list here together, and Mike, you were talking about how this is split across a 3-year plan. So I guess my question would be, are there additional things that we should be adding to this list to make it a more comprehensive list for a 5-year plan?
I think I'd defer to Rich and Mike on that. I think they, you know, they encourage people to look ahead, and it helps them to know what's coming up that's big.
Yeah, thank you, Kate. I actually think that's a really good idea. We've tried to think ahead here, and also without making it into a Christmas kind of wish list. But I think we will talk more about, before sending it up, maybe if there's anything that we just, want to make sure we get on here, if it is a 26, 27 item. Like I said, we tried to do that a little bit with technology, because we're starting to see these are things that just need to be built in as a sort of cycle. It shouldn't be every year, crossing your fingers and hoping. The buildings projects are a little harder, just because, you sort of see what's happening, and you don't know what's going to be that sort of emergent project in the next year or two. But I know Rich and I have been talking through a facilities master plan. Something like that would certainly inform a longer look. We do know of some long-term window projects, roofing projects, things like that. So I think we will talk a little bit more about that in the days before we officially send it up, about filling out those those future years columns.
Yeah, just to add to what Mike mentioned, we are working on putting out an RFP for a facilities master plan, which would be completed either by an architect or engineer. And after this facilities master plan is done, this would give us a better long-term snapshot and would help us fill out the long-term planning of what do we want to do in the next 4 years? What do we want to do in the next 5 years? What are the end of life of the various systems in the buildings?
Thank you both. Appreciate it.
Michelle, if I may,
Pardon me, Al, did you want to say something?
please. I see the line on the student Chromebook refresh, for a 3-year plan at 4,000 units per. Weren't we gonna get some of that accomplished from our operating budget? And so I guess we didn't do that. Now we're gonna opt to put that into a capital expense. Is that correct? Am I addressing this correctly, John?
Yeah, we did, early in the winter, before our forecast began to turn down a little, I think it was about $565,000 worth of pre-buying of Chromebooks we did last year. Does that sound like the right figure, Mike? You remember?
Yeah, I think it was about 3,000 we were able to buy, and Gina found us a great deal on them. So we were able to get really stretch our dollar on that one. But that was this year's refresh. So those, for something that's annual, yeah, this would be for next year. But we did get, I'm trying to think, because I think we did a K3 refresh this year. We had touchscreen Chromebooks. And then we were even able to get some additional ones for the high school. So this year we were solid. We got our full 25% of the cycle done this year. So this would be for next year.
So this will be a continual expense of 1.2 million at today's dollars? Till
Yes.
the end of- Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Probably increasing, honestly, with inflation and just the cost of technology.
Understood. Thank you.
Mike, is there any way when we submit this, I'm glad to hear one that you just said that we're at least now kind of working closer with the city to try to figure out, or at least be a part of this. I don't see honestly how we weren't before, but now I'm glad to see that we're going to have more communication that way. But like on this capital list here, there are some items that are like aged, right? So maybe they were submitted last year or the year prior. Like, how do we know which ones? Obviously, the air conditioning system, those are all recent, but there are some that have been, I'm sure, waiting.
Yeah.
Is there any way that we can, highlight which ones have been, waiting several years and really, for whatever reason, looked over?
Yeah.
My concern. I know we've got a lot of, and then we've got to consider mandates and things we don't know coming down the pike.
Sure.
But as far as some of these, that have been on the list for a while, how can I find out how long they've been there? Or perhaps they didn't make it on this list this time, but they were on the list last year or the year before. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe John, I don't know if you can help with that, but I mean, is there a highlighted, version of this that we can send over, without, being crude, but
Well, I'm sure they would take that information. It's very important. The portal or the template that they want people to submit under does not include that, but I think they would listen to us. We could make a separate submission or certainly add other information that we think is germane.
I think that would be great, only because it's hard for us, even I think on the committee, to know exactly what's going on and what the priorities are. So, being that, 1 or 2 steps removed in that process, then we might lose that communication saying like, hey, the board has had this discussion for a while or has been hearing from the community. And, what might be a priority for another department might not necessarily be the same priority that the board or that the district is, prioritizing and just wants to communicate that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
all
Anybody
right.
else have any questions? Non-committee members? Gladys, anyone?
No, I think the explanations have been excellent. and I'm just enjoying the explanation and learning more.
Thank you, Mrs. Cooper.
Excuse
Thank
me,
you. Going?
could you explain, John, under the technology, capital budget? Capital budget is something that comes from the city's end of it, hoping that they will pay for?
That's right. And they'll pay for it, as I said, one of two ways, just as a regular expense when it's incurred during the ensuing 12 months. Or if they happen to issue, let's say, bonds for a 10-year, even a 5-year basis, then the mayor's budget would include the first year pay down of those bonds, the principal and interest of that. But what we've seen is as we looked at what's been approved for some of the other departments, we found it was a pretty popular place to have your technology needs included. We even noticed some software that was being included in the capital budget. You don't see that too often. You like capital to be of a longer term nature, maybe something that's tangible. You put your hands on it, would last at least 5 or 7 years. But the cost of technology is so high that Danbury and other cities have turned to their capital budgets as a way to finance it.
Understood. I just wondering how practical it was with the city finance for our Chromebooks. I'm sorry, there's a couple other items under that technology. Oh, the copiers. And so
Right.
they would bond those out rather than have those accepted as in our, there we go. Thank you, Mike. Chromebooks, copiers, printers,
Yep.
760.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. You would think that they would match, and what you should do in finance, business, or corporate is match the life of the asset with the life of the borrowing, say, and not borrow for 10 years if something's only going to last 5 years. That's the principle behind it. But it does seem like the overriding factor in their decisions is how much they want to take out of the operating budget. It could be as low as 300,000 a year or a couple million. It really varies on what else they have going on in the mayor's budget that year. That's my read on it. So it's kind of hard to say.
Now, shame on me, but I don't remember last year's capital budget for technology. Was that presented?
We did not have we did present a capital budget request. We were told it was not timely. It was a day or two before the deadline, and it didn't make it.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
John, was it, maybe it was with you, Mike. We had like 4.5 million or something. What was the last request? Like we're looking at what am I looking at? 7 million?
7,680.
Right?
Yeah.
What was the request? Like, what is the typical request that we, put forth to the city? Is this number significantly higher, in line with, like, how does this look as opposed to last maybe year or the year before?
Well, one of the things that has been missing, I think, and there hasn't been, I felt the right kind of reach out from the Public Works Department to say to us, hey, capital budget is coming up. What kind of things do you think you need? What are your priorities? Here are the forms to use. Here's when you should give it back to us. I think if you go back a few years, Rich helped me out. There was a little more communication back and forth, but it just seemed to be at a minimum until last year. Am I assessing it correctly?
Yeah, nobody's really asked us for a capital budget for as long as I've been here. And, with working with Mike and John, we just felt that the Board of Ed should be more involved with that decision-making process. So that's why we've really past year or two trying to get more involved in it.
So Michelle, I think the answer is there really isn't much of a precedent. So we're trying to establish one now, and hopefully that this number is, kind of in the wheelhouse.
And most boards of education do adopt a capital budget, just like we're have in front of you and submit it to their city or town. The cities and towns handle it a little differently, but it's very common for boards to adopt a capital long-term plan for their facilities.
Thank you.
All right. I'll jump back into this, and there's just a couple more slides. So next one here. Okay, so this is just a low overview of some of the drivers that are in my department. Number one here, I had described this before. So on one side, you have capital, which is that list we just talked about. And then on the other side for buildings is our maintenance and repairs budget. And this is what Rich uses when he goes in there to do things like, we just had that leak in the high school and we had to do some repairs on the gym floor. When ACE flooded right at the end of last year, like on the last day of school, we had to rip up all the flooring, rip apart walls, do a flood cut, put new flooring in. That all came out of Rich's budget. Thank God we had enough in there and we're able to just sort of squeeze things around a little bit. We had to make a few hard decisions, but for the most part, we're able to save most of what we needed. So this is Rich's proposed budget for next year. So just to sort of run down here, Rich, why don't you talk through this one? These are all, you know a lot about these projects.
Sure, no problem. So starting off with KSI, and we did both KSI and Millridge Primary, we did replace the flooring in one of 3 pods. So my long-term plan is to do 1 pod each of the next 2 years. The reason why KSI is a little bit more expensive than Millridge Primary, there would be a asbestos abatement involved in it. But after 3 years, we would have totally new floors in both of those schools, and we could go on to another school. Millridge Primary Vestibule, that would be a security vestibule, and we looked at it 2 or 3 years ago, and we're looking at the outside. There's not much room where that sidewalk and the road is to build outside, but working with the principal, we have another idea about putting a security vestibule inside. Shelter Rock wall divider. Right now, Shelter Rock lacks a proper workspace for the teachers, which is actually required in their union contracts. So we'd like to do something with that. Pembroke, fenced and sheltered areas. There's a section of, I'll say fence or section of open area in the playground area that kids could run into the bushes and stuff, and it just would be a lot more secure to enclose the rest of that fence. Air water filter replacement. As we add, get more air purifiers and water bubblers, the average cost of those filters are about $50 a piece. So it all adds up. And $20,000 for bottle fillers. They seem to be very popular. So we'd like to just, continue to add them or replace the older 40 to 50-year-old water fountains. Restroom repairs, as you go through the schools, and I'll just point out Haystown, there's a lot of old 50, 60-year-old restrooms that are very tired and could use a fixture replacement, partition replacement. Pembroke gym floor, that's one of 2 floors, I'll say. Great Plain is another one that they have old VCT floor tile on the gym floor, and what we've done with a majority of the schools is put in a synthetic floor that doesn't require waxing yearly, and it's a little bit more soft on the feet. Blind replacement, I've been trying to do at least one school a year with the more modern blinds. There are several schools that we have blinds that are 30 to 40 years old.
Rich, did
Same
I
thing
see
with
that in the capital budget also? Blind replacement?
I w- so with the window and blind replacement that we have in the capital budget, from past experience, for instance, when they replaced the windows at the high school, they also replaced the blinds. So that's why we included that in with the Pembroke window for replacement, the blinds. This would be just to replace existing blinds where we're not doing windows.
Thank you, Rich.
You're welcome. Classroom counter replacement, same thing. If you walk into a lot of the schools we have 40 to 50-year-old countertops where the laminate is peeled off, and it's beyond its end of life. It would really make a nice facelift to replace some countertops in the classrooms. Flooding and drainage repairs. So that goes along with King Street Intermediate. We had a few $100,000, and that's for a more global to replace the whole driveway. If that isn't improved in the capital budget, I'd like to at least repair the immediate area, and it's the exit in front of King Street Intermediate. And what happens is that they have a storm drain that's in the grass, just to the left of the entrance, but it's a high spot. So the water doesn't drain into there because it's a high spot. So we'd like to add an extra storm drain or do some grading to lower that storm drain so the water will flow to that. It's another state mandate coming up where we're going to need to provide sanitary hygiene products. The way the state law reads, any restroom, any ladies' room, 3rd grade and up, and 1 boys' room per school, grade 3 and up. And that's supposed to go in effect this coming school year. And then we have Haystown exterior sidewalk to connect fields for wheelchair. There's an issue with the lower playground where there's no way for a student in a wheelchair to get down to that playground. So we'd like to do something with that as well.
Rich, 3rd from the bottom. Is that an unfunded state mandate, or are we gonna have some grant money for that?
That's an unfunded state mandate.
And did I hear you right? In the boys' room, anything? Okay. Well,
Yeah, boys' room too. And I've been talking to a lot of counterparts, and everybody's doing it a little bit different. I've heard of people that plan on stocking them on a Friday afternoon for Monday, and when they run out, or if they run out, they'll stock it next Monday. We're supposed to provide both sanitary napkins and tampons.
thank you, Rich.
You're welcome.
I just want to make a comment. The last item I think is very important, the exterior sidewalk to connect the fields for wheelchair. That's something that I see as a priority for.
Yeah. That's the and there's also a elevator plan for Haystown too, so that'll be the complementary exterior component to that.
Anybody have any other comments? Oh, Louisa, I see your hands up.
Thank you, Michelle. Okay, so I'm gonna ask the same question again that I asked for Mike on his list. How many of these things here are we in dire need of getting done within the next year? And how much is something that's been going on? Because I keep hearing 30, 40, 50, 60-year-old stuff in these schools, and I'm sure our list could be much longer than this. So is this just the more important things that you've identified that need to be repaired? And does this take into account any other things that may come up during the year? And also the mandate for the hygiene, I'm assuming, you know, I mean, we have a lot of students that are in need of assistance. So I don't, you know, to what Al said, it may be an unfunded mandate, but I do believe that we're helping a lot of young kids with that. So, you know, I don't have an issue with that at all, but I just want to know about the other items on the list and where they fall in the priority list.
Well,
Rich,
I
I can-
would say definitely the sanitary hygiene, as it's a state mandate, that would be probably our top one on the list. You know, I would say King Street the flooding and drainage repairs for 30,000. That's very important as well. It's been an issue the last few winters. A lot of these items, you know, we've let it slide for many years. So could we let it slide one more year? Yes, but I think it's important that every year we do some updating just to try to get our buildings up to speed. And actually what happened last year is we had a list of projects similar to this, and there's probably one or two that we won't be able to do because this list doesn't include unforeseen circumstances like the flood at the high school and the flood at ACE, where, you know, we probably spent upwards of $100,000 out of this budget to do renovations that were not planned because of a flood.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mike, did we have a discussion about Pembroke and fencing in that area just for security purposes?
Yeah, so and yeah, it didn't come up in this one. I had a question about it in our last board meeting when we were over at the high school. So I'll jump back here. So in the Capitol, you can see right, I don't know if you guys can see my cursor. Where is it? We had fencing here. Exterior fence replacement at 18 schools. Come on. It's this one here, third from the bottom in buildings. So part of this is we recognize a need to replace fencing, but depending on whether that comes through, we could sort of use some of that for security as well. I have, where is it in here? Here in Pem, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 down fence shelter areas at Pembroke. We have 95,000 set aside specifically for Pembroke. So this would live outside of that other fencing number in the capital budget. And this one is really going to be sitting down and thinking through where the evacuation areas are. Also, it's just good crowd control for the play areas there, so they don't have kids kind of running off down the hill and around the back of the school. But also just thinking, more strategically about evacuation areas, shelter areas if they're out there and it starts to rain or it's a windy or cold day, things like that. So 95 out of our budget will be dedicated towards that specific project.
And then we had mentioned that the wall divider for the workroom, that was also something that we have to do, right? So we can find somebody to mention.
Yeah, that's one that's come up multiple times, and it's come directly from NEA on several occasions too, and that they need a workroom over there, so we want to be able to provide that for them.
So that's another one that would be considered a priority.
I would think so. Yeah. And it's a small enough amount where I wouldn't expect something like that to get knocked out. The nice thing I won't say the nice thing, but this is our budget. This is one that we create internally. So assuming the board budget gets voted through and approved, this is what our number will be for Rich. So this is really our an internal decision that we make. We're going to go after these things and then we go do them and hope we don't have another flood at ACE on the last day of school.
I just want to ask one question. How we've been talking about for a couple of years the sinks and making sure that we've got some temporary sinks. I thought you were going to bring that up maybe.
Yes.
But that we were going to possibly roll that all into, our project. Maybe you can discuss that a little bit. Talk about how do we, how we are at least addressing the situation for the meantime.
Sure. Yeah, thank you for raising this question because I've had a few emails and questions about it. So the science labs at DHS are going to get renovated starting next summer. It's a 2-year process just because of the way the asbestos has to be abated. You can't do it when students are in the school. So it's going to take 2 years to get through the whole thing. Part of that renovation is going to be replacing all the plumbing in the walls. The current drains are pretty much solidified, calcified. I'm not sure what it is, but they're old glass pipes and they just don't drain. It's a very, very small trickle. So when the sinks are turned on, they don't drain, they overflow, and then we have a flood, which causes more problems. So we're always in this position when we're looking at something like this, so we say, boy, they're going to be completely renovating that building in 2 years' time, but we need sinks now. So how much can we spend doing a repair? You know, we can't reasonably go out and spend $100,000 on a repair, you know, when it's going to be built into a multi-million-dollar project just a year out. So we always have to sort of figure out ways to navigate this. So specifically for the issue with the science labs, Rich can talk a little bit more about this. We figured out a way to order portable sinks. I'll say we identified portable sinks as a workaround, and the city was able to order, I think, a dozen or so of them. I'm not exactly sure on the number. And then once they come, they literally can just get hooked up. It's, you know, it looks like a sink, it works like a sink, except the water sources are portable. You have a clean water and a gray water tank. You can use it for the lab, and then you can roll it down the hall and move it into the next lab, and then the kids can have it in there. So is it a perfect solution? No. But given, you know, the limited resources we have and you know, not wanting to throw bad money after good, or is it good money after bad? I can never get that one right. You know, it just didn't make sense to go and have a $100,000 plumbing repair for something that was going to be essentially gutted in a year's time. So, Rich, I think you have an update on the order. We hear it's coming in next week.
Yes, I spoke to Sean this week and they should be in at some point next week. And as Mike said, you know, it's not an ideal situation. It would be a little bit more maintenance on my staff's part, you know, filling the water and emptying the water, but it does create a solution that they'll be able to stick to the curriculum for this coming year until they can get the permanent sinks. And I'm sure we can always use them at other schools down the road, so they will come in handy.
Fantastic. So we purchased them, we're not leasing them, we purchased each individual unit?
Public Works purchased them, or I should say Public Buildings purchased them.
Yes, that's what I meant. Thank you. I'm just ecstatic about it. I think that's fantastic. I know it's not the perfect solution, but you know, we've sat at board meetings when they say as soon as it gets cold, that's it. They shut it down from November.
Yeah.
It's today till April, and that they can't follow the. So I know it's not ideal, but at least they have water and they can, you know, get through at least part of the curriculum this way.
Absolutely.
Thank you for your solution.
Of course. We had to get creative on that one.
I think that's great. That's
So-
what we do.
So Michelle, you actually brought up a great point, because in the science rooms at Rogers Park, because they're on a exterior uninsulated wall, they do shut down the water. So when we're done with those at the high school, we'll be able to redeploy them at Rogers Park, and they can have their curriculum throughout the winter.
That's what Mike and I were discussing about a week or two ago. So I'm really excited to hear that they were purchased already, because we were saying, you know, if they can be rolled around or moved, you know, rotate, that'd be great. So I just want to say thank you, because I know it's been something since I've been on the board I've been hearing about, and I'm just glad that we at least have some sort of a solution, you know, until we have the real finished product.
Yeah. Important thing is they'll be able to get through the curriculum. So that's what matters to me.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. So the last piece of this.
Can I ask a question? I'm sorry.
Sure. Yep.
What's the lifespan on these portable sinks?
Oh, good question. Rich, do you know?
I'm not exactly sure, but I would think we should be able to get probably 10 years out of them as long as they're taken care of properly.
I was actually, it's funny, Louise, I was in my daughter's preschool last week for our open house night. And I noticed they had a little one that was for like 2-year-olds, and it was there, and because it's in the basement of a church, there was no plumbing or any hookups in that room, but they turned it into a preschool room and were able to do it because they had this little cute little sink, and it's like looks like it'd been there for a while too. So I think 10 years is a good bet. All right. And then I wanted to just do a little comparison of what I identified are some of the big drivers of my department budget. So without going into the, the FTEs and everything, I wanted to run through sort of 4 big areas here for me. Safety advocates, it's an ongoing discussion. We're currently budgeted for 41. We're struggling to hire all 41. It seems like right when we get close, we always lose a few right away. But we're going to increase that budget number to 43 positions. And then that group is up for a contract renegotiation this year. So I've added in a small growth increase just so we can have a pretty close ballpark number. But we're expecting to be at about 1,342,000 on safety advocates for next year. And that'll be 43 total. So that'll be adding 2 more at the high school, 3 at each middle, and then 1 at each elementary. But with the additionals at the middle and the high school, it gives us a lot more flexibility for sick days, leave, vacation, whenever we're missing a few guys. That gives us a lot more cushion to pull and cover positions. Facilities repairs, you just saw Rich's budget line here. It was 684 last year. We gave it just about, it was actually 780. So just a nice $96,000 increase. These things have to be done. So IT services, this is one I wanted to flag because it is significant. Now, this is separate from devices. I put the device replenishment at the bottom. Those are the numbers that we just shared a moment ago. But IT services, in light of the summer that we had, we really want to beef up our cybersecurity. So we're doing some reassessment of our current services and looking for places where we can just have just a little bit more security. That SentinelOne is a place that we put into the capital budget, but it's a number of services like that we just believe will keep our systems more secure. So that's going to increase to about $685,000 next year. And those are the big drivers for operations. We expect most other things they won't be flat, but positions, all that kind of stuff is going to be relatively the same. And salaries will just roll over for the contracts. That's it. That's the end of my presentation. All right.
Anybody else with any final questions? Any on the committee or anybody who's not on the committee? Julie or anyone? Okay.
Thank you. I have a question. So I'm sorry, that will be for Mr. Sealing. When can we get an update? Because I noticed and everybody has asked about when can we get an update, and from the top, from the whole list, both of them, from the capital and from the school budget. When can we get an update, and when do we know, the start and the end of each one of these budgets?
Great question. So our budget, we'll know, as the board starts to see the budget presentations in January and February, as soon as the budget is voted through city council, we'll know, for example, if these facilities lines are on here, if Rich gets his 780, we're off to the races. We know those will all be the projects that get done. The capital could be a little bit more challenging. Is John still on here? I think
No,
John
he left.
Took off. I think he talked a little bit about the timeline. I think we know around January or February. And just a little, what I'm hoping is that when we see that list, if we identify a priority project that didn't get funded, I'm hoping we still have time to run back and say, oh, maybe we can still slip it in here somewhere, or, move Rich's line a little bit up or down here. So that one, as I understand it, January, February is when we'll learn about the capital projects.
Perfect. Thank you.
That's it. All right. Well, I want to thank everybody for coming tonight. It's 7:33. I'm looking to adjourn the meeting. Anybody?
So moved.
Comment, please.
Who was that, Gladys?
No, comment from Al Russo.
Oh, Al. Sorry, I couldn't hear you. Al.
Mike,
Did you say, I can't hear you. I'm sorry.
Who made the motion?
I
Who
don't know.
made?
Is there a motion? Did anybody? Was it Al?
I'll make the motion.
I wanted to comment before we adjourn.
Al, are you seconding?
No, I wanted to make a comment to ask
Oh,
Mike
okay.
a
All
question
right.
before we adjourn.
Please, I couldn't hear you. I guess it's a bad connection. Please go ahead, ask your question.
Mike, did I understand it? In other words, we'll try to, if we have any excess money in our budget, we'll try to spend it, just accomplish some of these capital expenses.
I can't answer that exactly, but what I would say is that if we've identified a project in capital which we know we can't live without, that doesn't get funded, I would certainly sit back down with Rich and John and try to rework his part to see if there's a way to fit it in, or at least, find some way to do, phase 1 of a 3-year build, something like that, because I really do see these two lists, even though one is city money, one is our money. I really do see them as these are things that we need to do to keep the schools up and running. So I hate to spend our limited budget money in a place where I know it can be funded by capital, so we try not to do that. But plumbing's a perfect example. There were places we just needed the sinks to work, and we had to dip into Rich's budget to do that. I didn't like to, but we needed to get kids
Right.
to wash their hands, so when we have to, we will, but it's not a habit I want to get into by any means.
Right. My thought is, and I'm not passing judgment, I'm just expressing an opinion
Sure.
that not plumbing notwithstanding, some of the other options are, if we do this, that we're already asking the city for 3 million out, or 3 million, whatever it is, out of reserves, and we're kind of under the scope.
Yeah.
I would hate to jeopardize that, but just a thought, not a just expressing a thought, not
Yeah.
an opinion. But thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Russo. That's well received. I definitely hear that, and that is part of our calculus when we come up with these lists too. And and I want to make sure we're not asking for the Taj Mahal, or it doesn't appear that we ever are. These are things that we need. So thank you for the thought. And I just want to thank the board. This was really a helpful conversation. Just the feedback and the ideas and suggestions, and people will send me an email about, oh, I was just over here, I saw that this isn't working, or what's going on with the swing set, or these are all great things to hear, because there's sort of official channels that they come through, Rich work orders or whatever. But when I hear that people are out there and they see, we need some wood chips over at Shelter Rock or whatever it is, it's just, I like hearing those things, because they can just be a sort of second layer to make sure we're not missing these things. So thank you for your feedback and the suggestions, both on the facilities and just also just guidance on how to think about, presenting some of this stuff. Everybody has a very good understanding of, just how these budgets work, and, how the district works alongside city council. And I'm always interested in getting thoughts and about how to make these things work better. So thank you all.
Thank you. All right, so motion to adjourn?
Second.
Al, second by Al. All right, thank you very much. It is 7:36.